Okay.
So we're at the David Ruggles Center, and we interpret the history of Florence in the 1840s and 50s. Um, and we talk about this Northampton Association, a utopian community that was here from 1842 to 1846.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the community of sort of radical equality that attracted David Ruggles, who we named our center for, who was a black abolitionist in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and Sojourner Truth, who came a year after him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an African American community here. This was a pass through on the Underground Railroad, but it was also a terminus.
Mm-hmm.
So people came and stayed here as well. And so in the 1840s, this was a small village at that time. Maybe like 600 people lived in Florence. Northampton was this downtown. That was, a little bit separate from this. And
Mm-hmm.
probably about 10% of the population here was African American. We've counted like 60 names on the census
Mm-hmm.
of about 600 people. So for a pretty white New England community, that was a significant African American community. Of course, sadly, it changed after the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. People were afraid
Mm.
of being kidnapped and sent back south, and so some people went to Canada
Right.
from here and helped settle communities in Canada, Chatham, and so we tell that story of this radical community, the NAEI, Northampton Association for Education and Industry,
Mm-hmm.
which was very democratic. It wasn't one of the utopian communities that had like a charismatic leader or religious. They believed all religions were fine. You didn't have to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Women and men were equal. Black and white were equal. And there were probably about from 100 to 150 people in the community at any given time. And they tried to make it producing the silk, which wasn't easy to do. Silk is very difficult to produce, silk thread. But they had other things going. They had a lot of mulberry trees because the worms eat mulberry leaves. They had a farm. They had a cutlery division and woodworking and a school. There were many children. A lot of people who came in families with their children. And there were even some people who sent their kids to board at the community to go to this progressive school.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I read that the school is still around, or the building is.
well, there isn't I'm not sure what that is because the school itself, at some point they met in a person's house, but then they were in the actual factory. Let's go in. So this room, because we can come back here later.
Mm-hmm.
This room tells more of David Ruggles' story,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
who we assume became a close friend of Sojourner's.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that Ruggles probably helped her become more political in her speaking,
Mm-hmm.
because she was mostly doing religious preaching before she came here, but then she was among all these abolitionists
Mm-hmm.
and all these speakers were coming through, Garrison and Frederick Douglass, and who actually Ruggles helped get out of slavery. 'Cause
Oh.
Ruggles was like the lead agent of the Underground Railroad in New York City
Mm.
for like 10 years before he came here. So
Yeah, because didn't he get injured a lot?
he did, and his health suffered.
And he died
terribly.
young.
He died young. He was blind.
Mm-hmm.
He had terrible intestinal issues, and so he tried the water cure,
Right.
which was very popular then.
Mm-hmm.
And
What was that? Sound like bathing with cold water.
wrapped yourself up in sheets with cold sheets like several times a day.
Uh-huh.
Put your feet in cold water, cold water, cold water. But it was also healthy eating and a like-minded community of people. So that had to be good for people's health too.
Mm-hmm.
And the medicine was so toxic then that probably people felt better,
Mm.
you know?
So it was almost like fasting.
almost.
Yeah, with water.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
when the community fell apart in 1846, he established his own water cure facility.
Right.
And was very popular. He was beloved, and Sojourner worked with him there.
Yeah, and she did the water treatment. She was kind of skeptical
Yes,
of reading
yes,
in
that's
Alexander.
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
in
Sojourner.
Washington's book. Yeah, and but it helped.
Yeah, no, Garrison came. And,
And then all these
Yeah.
women came, and it seemed like a really nice opportunity to get away and just
Yes.
be able to like
Oh, and for-
have a like a mini vacation. Like
Yes.
some women didn't want to go back
And
home.
for women, that was really special.
Mhm.
That was also true to a fair degree of the association, that women and the families liked living in community because they weren't isolated. That was the biggest thing. And the labor was shared, you know, so they were able to be more politically active and be in community instead of like isolated out on a farm,
Right.
like where many of them had come from.
So where does Matthias come in? Was this the place where Matthias
No,
was, or were you somewhere else?
Matthias, or
Matthias,
whatever
okay.
he called himself, was in New York.
Oh.
So she met him in New York City,
Okay.
and that was like 1832,
Oh, 'cause
early on when she was
Because I thought,
35.
oh, so I thought he had come here
No.
and took over this.
No. And that's what was so different about this community. It was egalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had a vote. They made decisions by consensus. They were pacifists. They were radical abolitionists. They believed in immediate abolition, reparations. They were kind of anti-organized church because the churches had been really dragging their feet on slavery. They talked about it, but they didn't do anything. Or they were pro like colonization. Yeah, they should be free, but go back to Africa, please.
Right.
So they lived together like that, you know. They worked it out, a lot of meetings, and I'll show when we walk up the hill. I'll show you where their church was. It was a pine grove outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the Ruggles room. Let's go into the Sojourner room.
Okay. So was this his house? Like, did he live
No,
here?
this was not his house. His house was on the river, but then it got moved. People moved houses back then.
You mean like actually moved the
Yeah,
house?
they put them on wheels, and I guess horses pulled them. I'm going to show you. I have a picture of his house here.
Okay.
So it's, yeah. This is what it looked like across the street.
Oh,
That was
that's
the
nice.
factory.
Why did they tear the factory down? It was a landmark.
Well, you know, it was in, I think it was like 50s or 60s when they tore it down.
Oh.
Nobody knew this history then,
Oh, for real?
you know?
Oh.
People really didn't know that much about in this, you know, in
Yeah.
Florence.
Oh. Wow.
And it wasn't, I mean, there were a few people that did, but it wasn't, it got turned down, which is really too bad. And, but this was a worker's house. This street was where a lot of factory workers lived, and it was kind of a mix of African American and Irish immigrants who were leaving because of the potato famine.
Oh.
So it was a mixed community. There was, they hung out together. There was intermarriage between blacks and Irish.
Oh, really?
So it was it must have been really interesting.
Anyone, like, was your family here then?
Nah, my family was probably like somewhere in Pennsylvania. I had Swedish relatives who were like out in the Midwest. So not here. I'm just looking for David Ruggles' house, which is the one that got moved.